think we'll wait about 1 more minute for people to log on in, and then we'll get started. Okay, let's see. Well, it's 6:31, so I say we can get started. I can at least, give my spiel. My name is Stephanie. Welcome, everyone. I am the Senior State Public Affairs Committee Delegate. If you are from Junior League, you are unsure what SPAC is. We work both here in JLSD and what's called California SPAC, CalSPAC, along with 17 other leagues to help track and promote and support legislation that have to do with our focus areas, both here in Junior League of San Diego, as well as all of the other 17 leagues. And then during the year, when we don't have legislation, we will do webinars, promote education. We usually have bubbles and ballots to learn about ballot issues. We work with the League of Women Voters on that. Day at City Hall, which we will be planning for this spring, as well as some other great stuff coming up. So keep your eyes peeled on that. I do want to introduce Jeannie Weidner, our esteemed speaker from the League of Women Voters of San Diego. Just a heads up, I know a lot of you have questions about how this recall election works. Both of us are nonpartisan organizations, so we will be able to answer questions in a nonpartisan way. We will not tell you who to vote for, why to vote for people, but we will give you that background information. If any of those questions are teetering on that side, we will be sure to let you know, hey, it's a great question. It's not something we're able to answer at this time. And then you can follow up with someone later on, just giving that heads up.
Okay.
Jeannie, I will go ahead and pass it over to you.
Okay, all righty. Well, thank you everyone for inviting me to do this evening. I'm excited to talk to you about this recall election that's taking place in less than 2 weeks. As you know, as I hope you know, the League of Women Voters, as Stephanie mentioned, is a nonpartisan organization. We've been around now for more than 100 years. We celebrated our 101st anniversary this year. We were founded the same year that the 19th Amendment was passed that gave women the right to vote. And since then, we have been an advocate for education, for getting people out to vote and informing voters, but we do not take a stand for any candidate or any political party. So right now, without further ado, I think I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and so that you can see the slides that I'm presenting tonight. And if you want to let me know, Stephanie, how that's looking on your
Looks
screen. Okay, perfect. So, so this evening, what I'd like to talk to you about is the special election that will be taking place on September 14th, 2021. That will be the potential recall of the current governor of California. My first part of my presentation is going to be emphasizing what the League would like to emphasize in terms of getting everyone out to vote and getting them informed as to how they can vote and what are the methods that that is available to them. So, so we want you to don't forget to exercise your rights to vote. And I'll be telling you more about your options as a voter in the next few slides. So first of all, what's this all about? What's this recall election all about? Now, the recall process in the state of California allows voters to decide whether or not to remove elected public officials from their office before their term is over. And I'll talk a little bit about, after I talk about what your voting options are, comparison of our recall process to some other options that are available in other states, just to give you a basis for comparison. This particular recall process began in June of 2020 when a petition began to be circulated at that time. Organizers of that recall campaign submitted more than 1.7 million valid signatures by the March 17th filing deadline, which was more than enough to trigger a recall election. And I'll also give those numbers later, but it was about 1.5 million that was required to trigger a recall election. And they actually submitted more than 2 million, and 1.7 were validated by the deadline. 46 candidates are running in this election as replacement or potential replacement candidates for the current governor. 9 of them are Democrats, 24 are Republicans, and the remaining candidates either are from a third party or have no party affiliation. And this election will allow all voters to, first of all, to decide whether or not to recall the governor, remove the governor from office, and then they have the option to replace him and voice their choice in replacing him with one of these 46 candidates. So if you have not already voted, and I'm certain some of you may have because you should have received your ballot in the mail. The first thing, of course, though, that you need to do is make sure that you are registered to vote. And the way that you can find out for sure that you're still on the registration rolls is to go to voter status, sosca.gov. And I'm going to take this opportunity right now to place that in the chat, although I am not seeing my option for the chat right here now. Oh, here we go. Here it is. So let me go ahead and enter that in the chat along with, I'm also entering it along with the other links that I'll be talking about in this presentation. So those are the links we'll be talking about, and you can either save the chat or copy them down as you wish. So if you have changed your name or address, you will need to re-register at that site. So you will only just change your registration without having a new registration. But if you are not registered, please register as soon as possible at registertovote.ca.gov. And I'll talk a little bit about that. We've actually passed the registration date that, kind of a no questions asked registration date that is always 2 weeks before an election. So the deadline to register for this particular election was August 30th, but don't worry, there is still another option. If you've missed that voter registration deadline, the regulations in California actually allow you to register provisionally, or register and then vote provisionally on the same day of the day that you vote. So you can still vote in this election. What you need to do, though, is go to a voting location now, and you can register and vote on the same day all the way up through Election Day, Tuesday, September 14th. So that's one of the ways that California makes it easy for their voters to express their choices, is by giving them same day registration. And it will be provisional, so they will have to check your registration and then your vote will be counted in the election. So how are you going to get your ballot? Well, the state of California is following the same protocols that they established last year during the 2020 election. Because of COVID, they want to make it as easy as possible for people to vote without having to expose themselves to any possibility of getting the Delta variant this time this year. So all registered voters should have gotten a ballot in the mail. And they went out the week of August 16th and should have been, you should have received them that week if your information is up to date. So I know, just as an aside, one of the concerns that the league has in an off year or for special elections is that turnout is traditionally quite low for those types of special elections, because there's usually only one issue on the ballot and people often don't feel like they need to take the time to learn about it or the time to go to their voting location. So we were anticipating that turnout would be low for this, and spread the word early, and so did the registrar of voters. However, I spoke to the registrar of voters on August 18th here in San Diego, or not here in San Diego. I'm not in San Diego, but you guys are. And they had already received 100,000 ballots when the ballots had only been gone in the mail. So that took mailing time as well. So they're actually anticipating that we may have a 70% turnout for this election, which would be quite high for a special election such as this one. Okay, so what's on the ballot? It's got two questions only. Do you want to recall the governor? Number one. And two, if he is recalled, if it's a successful recall, who do you want to replace him? So if more than 50% of voters vote yes on question one, then the replacement candidate with the most votes would become the governor. You do not need to answer both questions. You can answer just the first question, or you can even answer just the second question if you want, or both. And it's not dependent on how you answer the first question, whether or not you can select a replacement candidate. So it is your choice. My personal feeling is that even if you do not wish to recall the governor, you should have a voice in whoever takes his place. So my feeling is that, but again, it is every voter's choice. You can leave it blank, or you can answer both questions. So who's on the ballot? So the second question randomly lists the 46 replacement candidates so that it doesn't look like that the registrar is favoring any one candidate or another, or they don't want to list them alphabetically so that people with the last name don't get a chance to be at the top. There's actually 7 versions in San Diego County where they will be randomly listing the 47 replacement candidates. Again, there's 24 Republicans, 9 Democrats, and 13 either no party or third party. They will allow write-in candidates, and they had to qualify by yesterday in order to be qualified to be included as a write-in. This list will not be available until September 3rd. I tried to get an early peek at it, but I was not able to. But so only qualified write-in candidates will be accepted if you wish to put their name at the bottom of the candidate list. There's been some questions about whether or not this write-in candidate could be the incumbent governor, and unfortunately, that is not the case. The governor is not part of the replacement candidates. And in fact, the registrar of voters in San Diego asked me to let everyone know that every write-in candidate is tallied, and then the ballot is not counted if it is someone who is not has not been validated. So every Mickey Mouse, every Gavin Newsom actually wastes the time of the processing of the votes. So they ask that you not include invalid write-in candidates. I have a friend who said that she already voted and put in a write-in candidate. So hopefully her write-in candidate actually made the qualification list. So here are some of the more well-known candidates that are on that replacement list. Larry Elder was added as fairly late to as a replacement candidate on the ballot. He is on the Republican Party. He's a radio program host. He's currently polling highest as far as the replacement candidates. Democrat Kevin Paffrath is a YouTube financial advisor, a self-made man through real estate. He prefers to be called a JFK-style Democrat, and his main objective is to make California the 4th largest economy in the world instead of the 5th. Caitlyn Jenner is also running from the Republican Party. She's a former Olympian and a TV personality. Kevin Faulkner, you should all find to be a recognizable name. He's the former mayor of San Diego, and he's, of course, also from the Republican Party. John Cox is a businessman from San Diego who was also the former gubernatorial candidate and challenged Gavin Newsom in the last general election in 2018. And finally, Kevin Kiley is one of the more notable candidates. He's also from the Republican Party, and he's an assembly member that represents District 6. So as you can see, we have a lot of Kevins running as candidates for this particular election. So what are your options for voting? So all of us have 3 ways in which we can vote. We can either mail our ballot immediately, drop it off at one of the drop-off locations, or you can still vote in person. And if you do vote in person without bringing your ballot with you, the mail-in ballot will be invalidated because they have a very good system for checking whether or not people have submitted their mail-in ballots or voted in person. If you do mail your ballot, also, you can track your vote. So that's one of the advantages of mailing your ballot. You can track your vote and find out whether or not it's been received. So you don't need to put a stamp on your ballot, just put it right in the mailbox. And they do recommend that you get it back as early as possible because it must be postmarked by election day, or it will not be counted unless there's that postmark showing that it was mailed prior to election day. You can also drop off your ballot at any of the voting locations in your county. We have about 131 drop-off locations, and you can find one near you simply by clicking this particular link that I put in your in the chat. You can simply check San Diego County, and it shows all of the drop-off locations for San Diego. If you wanted to be more specific, you can also put in your zip code, and then you can find that it narrows it down to the ones that are closest to you. So that is a service of the Secretary of State website that allows you to find those locations. And again, if you decide to drop off your ballot, you must drop it off no later than 8 p.m. on election day on September 14th. So there's also in-person voting options, which is the final option. And there are 221 in-person voting locations. This is a map of them that I got from the Secretary of State site. They will be open for 4 days, not just election day. They'll be open between September 11th and September 14th. So that gives you the option of voting in person on the weekend before election day. Your voting location may be different this year. You can find it at this particular link, which gives a similar type of search engine as you found for the ballot boxes. However, you don't need to vote just at your voting location. If you happen to be working downtown and that's when you want to vote, you can go into any voting location and you're allowed to cast your vote at any voting location in San Diego County. So again, California is working hard to make it easy for the voters to voice their choice. There are also some early voting options. The registrar's office in San Diego has been open since August 16th from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday, and you can vote there. You could have voted there anytime now. And then again, Saturday, September 11th through Monday, September 13th, it will also be open for voting if you wish to vote at the county registrar's office. Okay, and lastly, I want to make a pitch for a website that the League maintains. And in fact, the San Diego League of Women Voters has been tasked with putting this up this year for the whole state. So even though this is a statewide election, our particular My colleague, Julianne C., and her team has been responsible for getting this information up on Voters Edge so that you can find out more about the election as well as about the candidates. So I recommend that you visit Voters Edge, and you can find out more about the election by clicking this on the links there. Here are some interesting information. It tells you exactly how much money was raised for both sides of the argument. And I'd like to also to point out, I'm going to mention this again, there is actually the recall process actually allows the team that opposes the election to different regulations on collecting money and collecting contributions, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But as a result, one person, Reed Hastings, who is CEO of Netflix, was actually able to contribute $3 million of his own money to support the effort of the no on recall. On the recall. So as you can see, those people who are opposed to the recall have collected about 7 times about almost 9 times as much money actually as those who are in favor of it. You can also check on the candidates and find out information about all of them that who have met all of the qualifications for candidacy in this election. And again, this is also listed randomly so that people aren't automatically directed to one candidate or another. You can see here where Kevin Faulkner has listed his 3 top priorities, and you can also check on his profile for other information that he would like the voters to know about himself. So this is a really good resource for all of you if you are would like to find out more about all of the candidates that are running, as well as about the recall election itself. So again, I hope that you will all, we're asking everyone to spread the word either through social media or email or just in person to make sure that everyone gets a chance to realize that they have an opportunity to vote in this election. So that's the plug that the league has in terms of getting everybody out to vote. What I would like to do is talk a little bit about the background for this particular election. What's the process for a recall, and what are some of the more interesting facts about this process? So first of all, the process for a recall is actually a 6-part process. You have to verify the signatures after the petition is circulated. And that, again, 1.7 million were certified and only about 1.495 million were needed. After all they are validated, they have to have a period of time where they allow voters to withdraw signatures. Only 42 voters elected to do so. Then the legislature is tasked with determining the cost of the recall. And actually this time the legislature didn't do a study of this. They've sped up the process. They simply budgeted $250 million for the process, which almost covers what they think the total cost will be. The date for the election had to be set, and that was determined by the lieutenant governor. But there was actually a pretty narrow period of time because they had to do it within 60 to 80 days after the process was verified, and it had to be on a Tuesday. So that's part of the reason why it fell on September 14th. Candidates who have decided to run, and this has been going on, of course, for months. It doesn't happen after the date is set for the election. But the candidates, in order to be listed on the ballot, have to either pay a filing fee of $4,000 or gather 7,000 signatures. So actually, that is a pretty low bar for candidates to be able to get their name on the ballot. And then, of course, the vote then takes place with the 2 questions. So just to give you a little background on recalls in California. The recall process was first came into being in 1913 through a legislative process. And Californians have routinely exercised their recall right. But even though there have been many recall attempts, they do not often succeed. In fact, there have been 55 attempts at recalling our governors in that approximately 110 years. And in fact, every single governor since 1960 has been has faced at least one recall petition. And then legislators in the same way, but again, only one has succeeded, and that was the one in 2003. And I'll talk a little bit about that one to compare it to this year's process. Legislators are the same way, 79 attempts, but only 5 were successfully recalled. So how did this one all start? I mentioned that it started in June of 2020, but actually that one was the 6th attempt to recall Governor Newsom since 1 month after his inauguration. So there have been 6 times where they have started circulating petitions to recall him from office. The lead proponent of the current recall campaign is a gentleman named Orrin Heatley, and he is a retired Yolo County Sheriff's sergeant. He actually handled the social media for one of the earlier failed recall bids and decided to launch one of his own. And his group, the California Patriot Coalition, particularly took issue with the Newsom administration's resistance to crackdowns on undocumented immigrants, as you know. However, it did not get off to a great start. But then came November 6, 2020, the French Laundry, the infamous French Laundry incidents. That was the time when, and I'm sure you've all heard of it, when Governor Newsom went to a birthday party at the French Laundry in Napa Valley, which is a very exclusive restaurant. I have had the good fortune to have actually eaten there once, and it is quite elite, I guess you could call it. Mr. Heatley's petitions on that day had only a little over 55,000 signatures. And as you know, he needed 1.5 million. However, after the dinner, a month later, he had nearly 500,000. And that actually would not have been, and that actually a month later, and his time would have been up, because there is only he was supposed to have collected these signatures within 160 days of launching the petition. And his time would have been up in mid-December. But unfortunately, on this very same day, November 6th, a judge granted the Heatley petition 4 more months to gather signatures. And that was because of COVID at the time, since no one was meeting in person and all of the petitions had to be signed remotely or through other means. He was given 4 more months to gather signatures, and obviously the last valid date was March 17th. So he was given more than twice as much time or not quite twice as much time to gather signatures as would have been under ordinary circumstances. One of the unfortunate things about that French Laundry dinner is that it was actually to celebrate a birthday of a lobbyist, and that there were 2 lobbyists from the California Medical Association also present at that dinner, which was part of the reason why it got so much press, because they were accused, and probably rightly so, of not following COVID protocols that were in the best public health interest. So how does this particular election compare to 2003, when Arnold Schwarzenegger became our governor after the recall of Gray Davis? Well, one of the factors is that right now, Newsom actually remains far more popular than Gray Davis was at the same time, same point in his recall campaign. As you may know, Newsom won with 62% of the vote in 2018, which is a significant margin. In fact, I've actually heard it was the highest margin in any gubernatorial election in California. And he still remains more popular than he does at that time. And in 2003, I meant to mention there of the 46 candidates that qualified for the ballot, there were an additional 40 candidates who had either filed an application but didn't follow through or withdrew their candidacy afterwards. So we had up to 86 people that actually wanted to possibly be on the ballot. But in 2003, 135 people ran to replace Davis, including some notoriety as Gary Coleman and pornographer Larry Flint. Arnold Schwarzenegger, however, when he entered the race, that was a game changer. And he did it with the flair of an accomplished actor and celebrity. And as a result, Arnold received 48%, more than 48%, I think it was 48.6% of the vote, and Davis was recalled with 55% of the vote. And it was not challenged in any way because essentially, if you look at it, Davis only received 45% of the vote and Arnold received 48%. So he obviously defeated Gray Davis by 3 points, even under the circumstances of a recall. So who has raised the most money? I mentioned that already when we looked at voters' choice or voters' edge. Supporters of the recall have raised approximately $8 million, but opponents have now raised $61 million. This was actually a few days ago, according to Cal Matters. Campaign finance rules have ruled in Mr. Newsom's favor for the no on recall because they treat the recall itself and his defense of the recall as a ballot issue. So that first question is considered a ballot issue. You vote yes or no on the ballot. However, all of the candidates have to meet the guidelines that are published for candidates, and as a result, they cannot raise the kind of, they have much greater limitations on the amount of money that they can raise from individuals. So again, Mr. Newsom was actually, or one of the groups that's in favor of him was actually able to get a $3 million donation from the founder of Netflix, Reed Hastings. So much so that his name now appears on some of their advertising on the recall. So essentially, the governor has unlimited funds, whereas his rivals have to abide by a $32,400 limit on individual contributions. So that's one of the reasons why they have not been able to raise as much money. So what do the polls say right now? Well, this is something that I downloaded just yesterday from 538 that keeps track of all of these polling. And this is the chart showing the polling averages since July 14th. And right now it is still actually within the margin of error, although it has gone up about, the margin has increased by 1% just in the last week. But so there appears to be more people in favor of keeping Governor Newsom in office as opposed to those who would like to remove him. And that is not unexpected here in California because Democrats outnumber Republicans about 2-to-1 in the state in terms of registration, although there are a lot of also independents in the state that can vote either way, or no party preference people in the state rather than. However, when asked, Republicans were far more likely to say that they would vote than either Democrats or independents. And in fact, 80% of Republicans registered voters said they were absolutely certain to vote in the election, compared to only 55% of Democrats and about half of independents. So within the margin of error means that we really can't make a valid prediction about what the outcome of this particular election will be. And as I mentioned before, Larry Elder leads as the replacement candidate in most polls. The average of those polls show him at about 22% favored. And second to him is Kevin Pathrath at about, it looks like about 7%. So one last thing that I'd like to do before, it's actually the second to last point that I want to make before the end of my presentation, is to compare our recall process to that of other states. So only 19 states even allow recall elections, which is a political process. It's obviously they're campaigning and we're electing them and that sort of thing. However, most states can only remove officials through impeachment, which is a legal process and of course requires certain standards to be met in terms of malfeasance or high crimes and misdemeanors, as we say in the federal Constitution. Since 2003, which was the successful recall of Gray Davis, there has only been one other recall that's even made the ballot in the United States, and that was the 2012 attempt to throw out Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker. This particular recall attempt also failed. One of the other differences, even in these states that also allow a recall, several of them have to have grounds for recall. They require that if before you start collecting signatures, you actually have either an indication of corruption or gross incompetence or malfeasance before you can even start the signatures collection, which we don't have in California. California, you can recall a governor just because you don't like him and you didn't vote for him in the last election. And also among these states, California has the lowest threshold for getting signatures of almost all of them, except one. Most of the other states require at least 25% to 40% of people who have voted in the last election have to sign the signatures or have to sign the signature petition in order to bring the recall to the ballot. Whereas we only need 12% of registered voters who voted in the last gubernatorial election, which is where we came up with the 1.495 million signatures. Okay, and lastly, last thing I'd like for you to consider is there's people talking about whether or not the whole process might be unconstitutional in the state of California. There were 2 California voters who challenged the legalities of the state's recall just recently in the last few months. And in fact, 2 days ago, the decision was handed down. But they based their petition on the fact that those voting for the recall would actually get 2 votes, whereas those opposing the recall would only get 1. And this, of course, was rightfully struck down by Judge Michael Fitzgerald because everyone can vote on both parts of the ballot. So it's not as if you only get 1 vote if you're trying to oppose the recall. So that was an argument that was not considered to be a valid argument for challenging the legality of the recall. However, I have also read where there are another argument that can be made is that voters opposing the recall could be denied equal protection or representation if their votes for the incumbent outnumber votes for the replacement challenger. For example, let's say that Governor Newsom is recalled with, 51% of the vote, which means that 49% of the voters wanted him to remain in office. And especially in this particular election, it looks like the replacement candidate may not get even as much as 25%. of the votes. So he would have actually doubled more than double the number of people who wanted him to stay in office versus the person who actually assumes his office. So there is a possibility that there may be a constitutional challenge to the election if that particular outcome happens. And as I mentioned, that would not have been valid for the 2003 election because Arnold actually got more votes than Gray Davis did in terms of the number of people who voted for him. So that concludes my presentation, but I am open to questions. I'm sure many of you may have some questions, so I can check in the Q&A.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions, so I'll start and just read them off for you.
Okay.
Question from Marcy. If we have changed our mind about who we want to vote for in our mail-in ballot, do you recommend we go in person on election day, or is that even a possibility?
I don't believe that is a possibility, but that is a great question. And you know what? That's one I'm sorry I didn't think to ask the registrar of voters when I spoke to some people there. I don't know. I really can't answer that. My feeling is that you don't get to get a take back of your vote, but it may be a possibility. Maybe let me see if I can find that out, and I can email Stephanie.
Okay.
With that answer, if I can find out what that is, because that's a great idea, that does come up when we realize how much time we have to vote in elections. So but I have a feeling that you get to vote once, you don't get to vote twice, or take it back. Yeah.
And then I'm just going to go through and see, does the $4,000 that candidates have to raise to be put on the ballot go towards their campaign, or is it used for another purpose?
I think it just goes to the state. It probably goes to the state and is then used to help offset the expense of the election. Okay. So that's my feeling. I'm pretty sure that's what happens. It's not that they have to raise it as far as their campaign. This is money it's a filing fee that they have to submit for the election.
The next question. Let's see. Can someone isn't it crazy that someone could become governor with only 25,000 votes? Why do they not take the top 3 or 4 candidates after a vote and then have a runoff?
That is an excellent suggestion. And this kind of brings up something that I also kind of wanted to include in the presentation, is that the league does not take a stance on this recall election at all, other than to try to encourage people to vote and let them know what's at stake. However, their Secretary of State Weber spoke at our state convention and actually asked the league if we might consider doing a study of whether or not this is really a democratic process, the way that it's handled in our state. Does it really serve democracy for the reason that you pointed out, the way that we do it, or even, why couldn't the lieutenant governor replace the governor as what would happen in most states if it was an impeachment? Mm-hmm. Anyway, I have to completely agree with you. I do not believe that the current system is the best system to get rid of a candidate or get rid of an official that we feel is not doing his or her job. So that's a good suggestion, that we could have a runoff election, possibly. The problem with that is that it would also increase the cost, though, because you would have to have 2 special elections. You would have the first one. And, in the way things are going now, he's only got a year left or a little over a year left in his term. Mm-hmm.
That brings me to another question, which is
Sure.
something I had a question on as well. because we do legislative tracking, and I know that I believe it's October 10th that all of the bills have to either, have already died in, the assembly or the House,
Mhm.
or that they're voted for. So when would he exit office if this recall does go through and Governor Newsom is voted out? When would that actually happen? When we get a butt in the seat, I guess would be the best way to put it. But would it be before this October 10th deadline? Because, that's my personal question.
Yeah.
And how long would that tenure be? I know we have an election next year, but how long would that be?
Well, the timeline for this is that all of the votes have to be certified or by October 14th, or at least all of the votes have to be accounted for in the system and certified. I think the final certification, and then after the final certification, which should occur right around that time, he would have to be out in 2 weeks. So he would be out by Halloween. So I think October 28th is the actual date. Yeah.
And the election for the governor next year is when?
I don't know the exact date, but it would be this, the first Tuesday in November.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was
So
something
probably the 4th, maybe, I don't know. Yeah.
Definitely.
So also to let everyone know that our primary will be back in June on the midterm elections. The California voted to move the primary to March just for presidential election years. But on the midterm elections, we are back in June for our primary elections. So that is when you will be able to vote in the primaries for the candidates for governor. So.
Okay. Another question that we have, I know we talked a little bit about the fiscal impact.
Mm-hmm.
I guess this person is asking, what is the financial impact? I know we talked about that $250 million that was allotted.
Yeah.
As someone who has looked through the budget, where does that money come from? Is that taxpayer money? Is that special money that's paid through where does it come from?
It comes out of the general fund. It has to come out of the general fund. And I'm sure there may be a subcategory in the general fund for elections, but this is the money that goes to all of the registrar of voters in all of the counties in California in order to print the ballots, get people hired, to do the poll, to work at the polls, and they think it's going to be 276 million is what they think. Yeah,
I've heard that number. So just for example, like in a non-election year, obviously, or in a non-recall year, does that money go to a general fund? Is that, for example, I know we have a surplus budget. That's why we're getting that Golden State stimulus. Does that play into how does that all kind of work out? Is that all money coming from the same pot?
My understanding is yes. I mean, if this comes out of the general fund, then that general fund, if it's not used for this, if we didn't have a special election this year, it would be used for the other, targeted, tasks or services that the state government provides. Yeah.
Awesome. Last question, unless there's any more that pop up, because I think we've gone over a lot of information.
Yeah.
And you are, so knowledgeable, which we really appreciate. We have a question from the audience. Are there opportunities to volunteer with the League of Women Voters to help spread the word about this upcoming election as well as other elections?
There certainly is. I appreciate that question very much. Let me share my screen once again so I can show you our website. Oh, it's okay. Let me try again. So here, oh my goodness, it took me to the old one. Oh boy, no. Yeah, let's see. We just got a new website just this summer. There we go. Let me try sharing my screen again. And I'll just show you how to get there. And I happen to be the chair of the Voter Empowerment Committee, which includes all of that includes the Speakers Bureau for the prop talks, as well as getting out the vote and Voters Edge and that sort of thing. So you are welcome to send me an email, and you can do that by clicking on Voter Empowerment and just clicking the volunteer button there, and it will come to me, and I will be happy to let you know what kind of opportunities that we have. We are going to be doing a few things for what we are primarily doing for getting out the vote for this particular election is through social media, as well as you may have seen on our website. We've got front and center some information about the recall election itself, and we've been asking our members to put things on Nextdoor. We are not doing stuff in person again, just because of the hesitancy about the Delta variant. But so we're trying to really spread the word mostly through social media and through digital content and that sort of thing. There's a lot of other organizations who are also obviously more partisan about it. They want to get the vote out for particular reason, because they want you to vote a particular way in the election. But we just want to encourage people to vote. But I'd be welcome to have you. We do, and next, beginning in the spring, of course, we're going to be getting quite busy with candidate forums for the primary elections, as well as whether or not, if we have some ballots, some ballot propositions that we'll be discussing and studying and learning about, and then spreading the word about them. So I'd be happy to have you part of that team. So.
Awesome. Well, if there's no other questions, I'm going to give it just one more second. If there are any other questions that people want answered, don't see anything coming through. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for Junior League. We will be taking attendance so that you can get training credits for this. We will be able to have this on our YouTube channel. I know that we are working hard to get it out before the end of the weekend so that you can share it with any friends or family members who may have questions about how this recall election works. And I believe that's everything. Jeannie, did you have anything else you'd like to share?
No, but I do want to look at that question that Marcy asked, and I will get back to you with that, Stephanie. I'll email that to you, and you can pass that on to your membership, because it's an interesting question. I think I'm right in saying that you only get to vote once, but it would be nice if you could change your mind and have the original vote invalidated. So I appreciate that question.
Awesome. Well, then I will let everyone off to the rest of their evening. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. Look forward to, working with you in the future. For anyone else who enjoyed this webinar, please keep your eyes peeled for other educational webinars and learning opportunities that come through from your state public affairs team.
Okay. And thank you again for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
Of course. Thank you so much, Jeannie.
Okay. Good night. Have a great night, everybody.